But I'm here to tell you that for most people, your monthly expenses is the number one determining factor of the quality of your retirement.
It's time for the My Retirement Clarity Podcast with Lee Perkins, financial planner and president of J.L. Perkins Wealth Management. Get ready for a good dose of inspiration, simplicity, implementation, and of course, clarity on how to successfully prepare for retirement and grow and preserve your wealth. Here's Ben George with Lee Perkins.
Welcome into the My Retirement Clarity Podcast. Wherever and whenever you're listening to the show, man, we really appreciate you tuning in. Last month was our biggest download month ever, so we are honored to have you tune into the show every week. This podcast really helps us in our mission to help good people make great decisions so they can enjoy an amazing retirement. And I've talked a little bit about this topic before on the podcast, but I get the question so often that I think it's really worth me spending a little bit more time here today. So as you can imagine, I get a lot of complex questions from people all the time. Everything from how to handle the sale of a business to maybe more complex planning issues that we have to work with a CPA or maybe even an attorney to come up with the best solution for a particular situation. At this point, I've been in the business a little bit over 16 years, and I don't think in the last few years I've ever received a question that I've never heard before. And I know everybody's situation is certainly different, and I've heard a lot of crazy things, but for the most part, the challenges and concerns that people face are things that I've dealt with many times before. But one question is asked of me more than any other question, and that's this. They say, Lee, how much do I need to retire? So on the surface, that seems like a pretty simple question to answer. And usually when somebody asks me this question, they follow it up quickly with, do you think $1 million is enough? So I've heard this question literally hundreds of times. And I've even talked about the figure of $1 million on the show before and why that seems to have some type of magic surrounding it. Being a millionaire is certainly that a lot of people strive to attain. And really for many people, the goal is to get to $1 million in their retirement savings. And so once some of these folks get to the $1 million, they think that they're good and they're going to be good in retirement because they're finally a millionaire. But so when somebody asks me if $1 million is enough to retire on, I can't answer that question because I don't have enough context, meaning I don't have enough other information usually to know if the person can retire on this amount of money or not. So if you're listening to the show today and you've got $1 million saved for retirement, I would tell you that for some of you, you're going to have a great retirement. You're going to have the flexibility to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, and things are going to be really great for you in retirement. However, I think there's probably also a lot of people out there, certainly listeners of the show, that have $1 million that if you retire today, you're probably going to struggle a little bit in retirement. And that retirement's probably not going to be everything that you hoped for. And it comes down to one word, and that word is expenses. It's not a sexy number to talk about. People don't brag about their expenses. I've never heard anybody reference their expenses to their golfing buddies the same way that people sometimes seem really eager to talk about how much money they've made in the stock market or on this company or that company. But I'm here to tell you that for most people, your monthly expenses is the number one determining factor of the quality of your retirement. And I've said it on the show before many times, and I'll say it here again today. I've met people that have got $300,000 saved for retirement, live like kings and queens when they retire. But I've seen people with $2 or $3 million really struggle in their retirement because their expenses are too high. They spend too much money. Hey folks, Lee Perkins here. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know how much I hate taxes, and I know you probably do too. Our politicians are completely out of control. Their spending is off the chart, and you've got to be prepared for increasing taxes in the future. So we've written a book called Diffuse, 7 Steps to Protecting Your 401k or IRA. from the ticking tax time bomb. You're going to want to grab a copy of this book and learn how you can protect yourself. Then you'll have to decide if you want to take action right now or if you'd rather wait until the IRS changes the rules of the game. Either way, the choice is yours. To get a free copy of the book, just text the word DEFUSE to 478-475-2050. That's DEFUSE to 478-475-2050. And we'll send you a free copy. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. So I met with somebody earlier this year, so it was in January, and they told me they want to retire at the end of the year. And they've saved what I consider to be a really pretty good amount for retirement. So I think they should be okay. But when we walked through things in the planning software, the long-term projections didn't look great for them. And really, it's because of how much money they spend. They told me they spend about $8,000 a month. So I tried to dig a little bit deeper into what this $8,000 a month was, and they didn't really have a great answer. They just knew that that's about how much money they bring home every month right now, and that they pretty much spend all of that money every month. So really kind of at that first meeting, and even in the second meeting when we talked, they were really more interested in trying to figure out how they could grow their assets, try to grow that money in this last year before they retire, because they want to go out December 31st, and this is both the husband and the wife. And I'm sure we could probably help them take more risk and potentially get a higher return and maybe increase the value of the portfolio. But I challenged them to dig a little bit deeper into that monthly expense number. And after going through this with them, it was pretty clear that they weren't keeping track of how much money they spend every month. They really didn't have a clue, and they did not have the same answer when I asked them. So again, I'm not saying everybody has to have a budget. I do hope that at some point in retirement, your finances are to the point to where you don't have to do a monthly budget. But what I did is I challenged them to go home and write down every single thing that they spend. And I told them I don't need to know all of your expenses. I'm not going to put them on a budget for them. These are grown folks. I don't care what their bills are or how much they spend eating out or on their hobbies or entertainment or anything like that. I just wanted them to have a realistic idea of how much money they can spend every month. So they came back to me 3 months later. So this was, it was really about 2 weeks ago. And here we are about mid-April right now. And so what they've done, they figured out that they pretty much spend about $5,000. They were spending way more than they needed to. So after going through this exercise for 3 months, they're really confident that those living expenses are closer to $5,000 a month rather than $8,000. So my challenge to them was to live like this from now until they retire, or till they want to retire, which is December of this year. And any money above this to save. So this is a challenge that I've extended to literally dozens and dozens of people over the last 16 years. But it is rare, very, very rare that somebody actually takes me up on it. So again, we're now 3 months into the challenge. They're living on the $5,000 a month. They've saved the other $3,000 a month. And I think it's going to work out very, very well for these folks. Now, I know we're about to enter summer. Vacations are going to happen, and probably some other expenses that are, associated with spring and summer yard work and those kind of things. Those are going to pop up. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can stick within the $5,000 a month budget that they've set for themselves. But I think if they can, their outlook for retirement is going to be way better than it did when we were showing the $8,000 a month expenses. So this is going to be the proof to them, and this is going to give them every answer that they need to know that they can actually retire at the end of the year on that $5,000 a month. So my challenge to you is simple. If you're thinking about retiring this year, or maybe even sometime next year, I want you to know exactly how much money you spend every month right now. Look to see if there's any fat that you can trim off of your budget. And if there's none, that's fine. You can sort of back into the numbers that you need and figure out what the income gap is, and especially when that paycheck goes away, because really at that point, it's possible that you're going to be dependent on just Social Security, maybe a pension, probably not for most people, and then whatever distribution it is that you need from your assets. And so once you figure this out, then you're going to have a good enough idea of how long your money is going to last you in retirement. Now, my hope for you is that your money is going to far outlast you and your spouse if you're married. And certainly that's the goal for everybody, because nobody wants to outlive their money. So back to the original question, how much money do you need to retire? Well, it depends. It depends on how much money you spend every month. So if you don't know how or where to start with this, there's dozens, probably hundreds of budget forms online. I don't want you to get too bogged down in creating some massive spreadsheet. Just write it all down. If you can't find one that you like online, we've got one here at our office that we give our clients. If you'd like a copy of that, then just shoot me a quick email at lee@jlperkinswealth.com, and I'll email you a copy. It's nothing fancy. It's just a form that you can use to fill in and sort of track your income and your expenses. So remember, retirement boils down to income versus expenses, and you want to make sure that your income always exceeds your expenses. So it's just like what our parents and grandparents used to tell us when we were a kid and then when we were a young adult. Always spend less than you've got coming in every month. And if you do that, you should be fine. So that's it for today. A little bit shorter podcast than normal, but it's a very important message that we can all apply to our situation. So if you've got questions about your situation, you can certainly connect with me by going to www.talkwithlee.com, and you can grab a spot on my calendar and we'll set up a brief phone call. Folks do that every week, and I'm always happy to talk to the listeners of the podcast. As always, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Lee Perkins here, and I want to thank you so much for tuning into the show today. If you like our podcast, we would be honored if you would share the show with others. And one great way to do that is by posting the show to your social media pages or by just telling others about it. Either way, we would really appreciate it. And of course, if you do enjoy the show, we would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star review, and this certainly helps other people like you find our show. And if you want to learn a little more about our firm and how we help people have the best retirement they can possibly have, go check us out at www.myretirementclarity.com. There are a lot of great resources that you can access directly on the website. And of course, if you want to have a conversation with me, you can visit www.talkwithlee.com, and this will take you directly to my calendar. And there you can schedule a 15-minute phone call so I can learn a little bit more about your situation. Of course, everybody is not a great fit for our firm, but if I think we can add value and put you in a better situation, I'll let you know, and we can certainly talk about the next steps. So thanks again for tuning into the show, and we'll catch you next time.
Investment advisory services are offered by J.L. Perkins Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor and insurance agency. Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Always consult with a qualified tax, legal, or investment professional before taking any action.